Hello dear students, and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to travel back almost 3,000 years to a land of deserts, mountains, and rivers, a land that gave the ancient world one of its largest and most remarkable empires. This is the full history of ancient Persia, from a small kingdom in the hills of Iran to an empire that once stretched from Egypt to India and finally to its fall. Along the way you will learn history, and you will also learn English. Listen carefully, notice words like empire, conquest, dynasty, and legacy, and repeat the sentences that stay with you. Stay with me until the end, and if you enjoy learning English through real history, subscribe to the channel and continue this journey with me. Chapter 1. The Land Before the Empire. Long before Persia became an empire, it was simply a place. A wide, difficult land on the plateau of modern-day Iran, surrounded by mountains, deserts, and a few fertile valleys. Life here was never easy. Water was scarce, summers were brutally hot, winters in the mountains were harsh and cold. The people who settled this land had to be resourceful, patient, and strong simply to survive. Among the many groups living across this plateau, two related peoples slowly grew in importance: the Medes and the Persians. Both spoke related languages, part of a larger family we now call Iranian languages, related distantly to many languages spoken across Europe and South Asia today. The Medes settled in the north and west, building a kingdom that, for a time, was more powerful than their southern relatives, the Persians. The Persians settled further south, in a region called Fars, or Persis, the very name that would later give us the word Persia. For generations, the Persian tribes lived as a smaller, less powerful people, sometimes ruled by their Median neighbors, sometimes independent, always watching, learning, and slowly growing stronger. Nothing about this quiet corner of the ancient world suggested, yet, that it would soon produce one of the largest empires humanity had ever seen. Chapter 2. Cyrus the Great and the Birth of an Empire. Everything changed with one man. His name was Cyrus, and history remembers him as Cyrus the Great, a title very few rulers in history have ever truly earned. Cyrus became king of a small Persian kingdom around the middle of the 6th century before our era. At the time, Persia was still a vassal state, paying respect and tribute to the more powerful Median Empire. But Cyrus had ambition, skill, and, according to many ancient accounts, an unusual talent for winning loyalty rather than only fear. Around 550 BCE, Cyrus led a rebellion against his Median overlord and won. Almost overnight, the ruled became the ruler. The Persian Empire, later known as the Achaemenid Empire after Cyrus's family line, was born. But Cyrus did not stop there. He turned west and conquered the wealthy kingdom of Lydia, famous for its gold and its legendary king, Croesus. He turned east and brought vast territories of Central Asia under Persian control. And in 539 BCE, he achieved something that echoed across the ancient world for centuries. He conquered Babylon, one of the greatest cities on earth, without, according to many accounts, destroying it or slaughtering its people in the way many conquerors of that era did. This is one of the most important and most surprising parts of Cyrus's legacy. Unlike many ancient conquerors, Cyrus often ruled newly conquered peoples with a policy of tolerance. He allowed local customs, local religions, and local rulers to continue functioning under Persian authority, as long as they accepted his rule and paid their taxes. He is remembered, particularly in Jewish history, for allowing the Jewish people, who had been exiled in Babylon, to return to their homeland and rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. This act of tolerance was so remarkable for its time that Cyrus is mentioned respectfully in the Hebrew Bible itself, a rare honor for a foreign king. By the time Cyrus died, around 530 BCE, he had built the largest empire the world had yet known, stretching from the Mediterranean coast to the borders of India. And he had built it, in large part, not only through conquest, but through a surprisingly modern idea: that an empire could last longer if its people were governed with a degree of respect, rather than only through fear. Chapter 3. Darius I and the Machine Behind the Empire. Conquering an empire is difficult. Holding one together, governing it, feeding it, defending it is even harder. This is where our next major figure enters the story, Darius I, who came to the throne around 522 BCE after a period of political struggle following the death of Cyrus's son Cambyses. Darius is remembered less as a conqueror, though he did expand Persian territory further, and more as a brilliant organizer, the man who built the administrative machine that allowed such an enormous empire to actually function. Under Darius, the empire was divided into provinces called satrapies, each governed by an official called a satrap, who managed local affairs while remaining loyal and accountable to the Persian king. Darius also built one of the ancient world's most impressive infrastructure projects, the Royal Road, a highway system stretching over 2,000 kilometers, connecting the empire's distant regions. Along this road, relay stations allowed royal messengers on horseback to travel enormous distances in just days, a communication system so effective that the ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote admiringly that neither snow nor rain nor heat nor darkness could stop these messengers from completing their journey, words that, centuries later, would even inspire the motto of a modern postal service on the other side of the world. Darius also standardized currency across the empire, introduced a more organized tax system, and continued a policy of respecting local religions and customs, much like Cyrus before him. Under his rule, the Persian Empire reached its greatest size, stretching from the Indus River in the east to Thrace and Macedonia in the southeastern corner of Europe, to Egypt in the southwest. But Darius's reign was not only about administration, it was also the beginning of a long and difficult conflict with a group of independent city-states far to the west, cities that, individually, seemed far too small to threaten an empire of this size, but that would soon prove surprisingly difficult to conquer. Those cities belonged to Greece. Chapter 4: Xerxes and the Wars with Greece. The conflict between Persia and the Greek city-states became one of the most famous chapters in ancient history, remembered, retold, and dramatized for thousands of years afterward. It began under Darius, when Persian forces attempted to punish Athens and other Greek cities for supporting a rebellion in one of Persia's territories in Asia Minor. In 490 BCE, Persian forces landed at a place called Marathon and were unexpectedly defeated by a smaller Athenian army. A battle so significant that, according to legend, a messenger ran the entire distance back to Athens to deliver news of the victory, giving us the origin of the modern marathon race. Darius died before he could fully avenge this defeat, and the task fell to his son, Xerxes I, who came to power around 486 BCE. Xerxes assembled what ancient sources describe as an enormous invasion force, by land and by sea, determined to finally bring the troublesome Greek city-states under full Persian control. The war produced some of the most legendary moments in ancient military history. At Thermopylae, a narrow mountain pass, a small force of Greek soldiers, famously including 300 Spartans under their king Leonidas, held off the much larger Persian army for several days before being defeated, a battle remembered for centuries as a symbol of extraordinary courage against overwhelming odds. Xerxes did eventually capture and burn Athens, but Persian forces suffered major defeats at the naval battle of Salamis and later at the land battle of Plataea, and eventually, after years of costly fighting, Persian ambitions to fully conquer Greece faded. It is worth understanding this conflict honestly. From the Greek perspective, preserved so vividly in Greek writing that has survived for thousands of years, this was a heroic struggle for freedom against a tyrannical foreign empire. From the Persian perspective, this was simply one difficult, ultimately unsuccessful frontier campaign, a small setback at the edge of a vast empire that still controlled far more land, people, and wealth than Greece ever would. Both perspectives contain truth, and understanding history often means holding more than one point of view at the same time. Chapter 5: Life inside the Persian Empire. Beyond wars and kings, it is worth pausing to understand what life actually looked like inside this enormous empire, because the Achaemenid Persian Empire was, in many ways, remarkably advanced for its time. At the heart of the empire stood magnificent cities, and none more impressive than Persepolis, a ceremonial capital built primarily under Darius and his successors. Persepolis was not simply a city for ordinary daily governance, but a grand stage for royal power, decorated with enormous stone reliefs showing representatives from across the empire, Egyptians, Babylonians, Indians, and many others, bringing gifts to the Persian king, a visual reminder of just how vast and diverse this empire truly was. Religion within the empire was equally significant. Many Persians followed Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest continuously practiced religions, founded by the prophet Zoroaster. Zoroastrianism introduced powerful ideas that would echo far beyond Persia's borders, including a clear cosmic struggle between good and truth on one side and evil and falsehood on the other, ideas that some historians believe influenced later religious traditions across the region. The empire was also remarkably diverse, home to Persians, Medes, Babylonians, Egyptians, Lydians, Jews, Greeks from Asia Minor, and many others, each generally allowed to keep their own language, religion, and local customs, as long as loyalty and taxes flowed toward the Persian throne. This approach to governing such a diverse population, sometimes described by modern historians as an early example of a multicultural empire, was part of what allowed Persian rule to last for roughly 2 centuries, an impressively long time for an empire of such enormous size in the ancient world. Chapter 6: The Fall to Alexander the Great. Every empire, no matter how powerful, eventually meets its match. And for the Achaemenid Persian Empire, that moment arrived in the form of a young Macedonian king with enormous ambition, Alexander the Great. By the time Alexander crossed into Persian territory in 334 BCE, the Persian Empire, though still vast and wealthy, had weakened in certain ways, worn down by internal court struggles, occasional rebellions, and less effective rulers following the strong leadership of Cyrus and Darius. Alexander, leading a smaller but highly disciplined and innovative army, defeated Persian forces in a series of decisive battles, at the Granicus River, at Issus, and finally, most decisively, at Gaugamela in 331 BCE. The last Achaemenid king, Darius III, fled the battlefield at Gaugamela and was later killed by his own officials as Alexander's forces pursued him, bringing a symbolic and literal end to roughly 200 years of Achaemenid rule. Alexander went on to capture and, controversially, burn much of Persepolis, the magnificent ceremonial capital, an act some ancient sources describe as revenge for the earlier Persian burning of Athens generations before. With this, the first great Persian empire came to an end. But it is important to understand something powerful here. The fall of the Achaemenid dynasty did not mean the end of Persian civilization, its language, its culture, or its identity. It meant instead a pause, a period under foreign Greek-influenced rule, before Persia would eventually rise again, not once, but twice more, in forms that would prove just as remarkable as the empire of Cyrus and Darius. Chapter 7: Rising Again, the Parthian Empire. For roughly a century after Alexander's death, Persia was ruled by his successors and their descendants, a period known as the Seleucid era, heavily influenced by Greek culture, language, and governance. But Persian identity, resilient and deeply rooted, did not disappear. Around the middle of the 3rd century BCE, a group known as the Parthians, originally a nomadic Iranian people from the northeastern edge of the Old Empire, began expanding their power, gradually pushing Greek Seleucid rulers out of Persian territory. By the middle of the 2nd century BCE, the Parthian Empire controlled the Persian heartland once again, marking a genuine Persian revival. The Parthian Empire became known for several distinct achievements. Its heavily armored cavalry and skilled mounted archers became legendary, particularly a battle tactic known as the Parthian shot, where a mounted archer would fire arrows backward while retreating at full gallop, a maneuver so effective it gave English the phrase parting shot, a final clever remark delivered while leaving a conversation. The Parthians also became a major regional power, controlling important sections of the Silk Road, growing enormously wealthy from trade connecting China, India, Persia, and the Roman world. For roughly 4 centuries, the Parthian Empire stood as one of Rome's most persistent and respected rivals in the ancient world, fighting several major wars against Roman forces along their shared frontier. Wars that neither side ever fully or permanently won. A rough balance of power between two of the ancient world's great empires that lasted for generations. Chapter 8. The Sassanid Golden Age. Around 224 CE, internal Parthian weakness allowed a new Persian dynasty to rise, the Sassanids, who would build what many historians consider the second great flowering of ancient Persian civilization, and in many ways its most culturally brilliant era. The Sassanid Empire consciously looked back to the glory of Cyrus and Darius, presenting itself as the true continuation of ancient Persian greatness, rather than simply another regional power. Under strong rulers such as Shapur I, the Sassanids expanded their territory significantly and, remarkably, even captured a Roman emperor, Valerian, in battle. A stunning humiliation for Rome that Sassanid art proudly commemorated in stone carvings that survive to this day. The Sassanid period is remembered for extraordinary cultural and intellectual achievement. Zoroastrianism became firmly established as the empire's official state religion. Magnificent cities, palaces, and engineering projects, including impressive dams and irrigation systems, flourished across Persian territory. Sassanid Persia also became an important center of learning, art, and administration, influencing neighboring civilizations, including, eventually, the early Islamic world that would later absorb and adapt many Persian administrative, artistic, and cultural traditions. For over 400 years, the Sassanid Empire stood as one of the two dominant superpowers of the ancient world, locked in an ongoing rivalry with Rome and later the Byzantine Empire, its Roman successor in the east. But this long rivalry, as we will see, would eventually leave both great powers dangerously weakened at the worst possible moment. Chapter 9. The End of Ancient Persia. By the early 7th century CE, centuries of exhausting warfare between the Sassanid Persian Empire and the Byzantine Empire had drained both sides severely, financially, militarily, and administratively. Neither empire fully understood that this prolonged, mutually damaging conflict was creating a dangerous vulnerability, right at the moment a powerful new force was emerging from the Arabian Peninsula. Following the rise of Islam in the 7th century, Arab Muslim armies began a series of remarkable military campaigns, expanding rapidly out of Arabia. The weakened Sassanid Empire, still recovering from its long war against Byzantium, proved unable to withstand this new challenge. Following decisive defeats, including the significant battles of Al-Qadisiyah and Nahavand, Arab Muslim forces gradually conquered Persian territory throughout the mid-7th century, and by 651 CE, the last Sassanid emperor, Yazdegerd III, had been killed, bringing a definitive end to over 1,000 years of ancient Persian imperial rule, stretching all the way back to Cyrus the Great. This moment marked a genuine turning point, not only politically but religiously and culturally, as Persia gradually, over subsequent centuries, transitioned from a predominantly Zoroastrian civilization into a predominantly Muslim one, while remarkably preserving much of its distinct Persian language, literature, and cultural identity. A rare example in history of a conquered civilization managing to preserve its core identity even after profound religious and political transformation. Chapter 10. The Legacy of Persia. Ancient Persia's empires eventually ended, as all empires eventually do, but their influence never truly disappeared. It simply changed form, echoing forward through thousands of years of human history in ways many people rarely stop to consider. Persian administrative innovations, provincial government, organized taxation, efficient road and communication systems influenced later empires that studied and adapted Persian methods of governing vast, diverse territories. Zoroastrian religious ideas about a cosmic struggle between good and evil influenced religious thought across the wider region for centuries. Persian art, architecture, and court culture profoundly shaped the later Islamic world that eventually absorbed Persian territory, blending distinctly Persian aesthetic and administrative traditions into the broader civilization that followed. And the Persian language itself, remarkably, never disappeared. Modern Persian, spoken today by tens of millions of people primarily in Iran, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan, remains directly descended from the language spoken in the courts of Cyrus and Darius nearly 3,000 years ago, a genuine living thread connecting the ancient world directly to the present day. From a small kingdom in the hills of Fars to an empire stretching across 3 continents, through conquest by Alexander, revival under the Parthians, golden age under the Sassanids, and finally transformation under Islamic rule, the story of ancient Persia is, in many ways, the story of extraordinary resilience, a civilization that rose, fell, and rose again, repeatedly, across more than 1,000 years, leaving behind a legacy that still shapes language, culture, and identity across an enormous region of our modern world. If today's journey through ancient Persia's history helped you understand this remarkable civilization a little more deeply, remember one new word, one new sentence, one new idea, and try to use it today. Growth in history and growth in English both happen the same patient way, one honest story at a time. If this video helped you, like it, share it, and subscribe to the channel so we can keep exploring history, human stories, and the English language together. See you in the next video.